Recognizing Captain John Murphy for his community emergency volunteer coordination efforts. And I have a short official proclamation, and then I understand we have a little rebuttal from Clara Johnson. John? Come on up. Okay. This isn't the usual thing full of whereases and wherefores. Commendation. On behalf of the Brisbane City Council on this date, April 9, 2007, wrong date, we commend Fire Captain John Murphy on his training, support, and guidance to the community emergency volunteers for more than a decade. His contributions have been extraordinary. The CEVs have benefited immeasurably from his work, as well as the people of Brisbane, whose safety has always been his goal. All right. Sarah? No, you stay right there. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a thank you for Fire Captain John Murphy from the CEVs. Captain Murphy has provided support and guidance to the community emergency volunteers for more than a decade. In fact, 15 years we figured out tonight. His contribution to their group gave it the necessary expertise and continuity that were essential for survival. Some members of the department, the fire department, were not certain how to receive these outsiders. The CEVs were not trained firefighters, and they didn't want to become firefighters. Instead, they wanted to support the department when there was a disaster. This was a new reality for the department, and there were some uncertain times. John stepped forward and said, "I'll provide the training and assistance to help these volunteers." John researched the NERT program and training from San Francisco and adapted it to the CEVs. Captain Murphy made sure that there was a schedule of CPR and first aid classes offered by the department to accommodate the CEVs. He wrote a training manual for the group. He attended meetings of the advisory committee that plans the activities of the group. Captain Murphy helped revise the CEV handbook that describes the group's its functions and activities. John attended quarterly meetings and taught classes at those meetings. He advised the group and mentored its members. He helped to diffuse conflicts and encourage cooperation. For members, he helped to diffuse, For many years, he continued to teach us CPR and first aid. Captain Murphy designed and executed yearly exercises that gave the classes a more realistic context in which to apply the lessons. He worked with the County Office of Emergency Services to provide us with information and opportunities. CEVs were sent to participate in county-wide exercises, and a couple of CEVs attended CARD events. He worked to send a CEV to the FEMA Academy. He was always looking for ways for us to improve. Captain Murphy understands that a group of volunteers need a steady, patient professional to guide them. He exhibits extraordinary insight and understanding of people's behavior and empathy for his fellow humans. His integrity and strength of purpose has inspired the volunteers. The community emergency volunteers have benefited immeasurably from his work with the program. His contribution has been extraordinary. The CEVs owe him a great debt, and so do the people of Brisbane. From all of us to you. We're going to take good care. We're going to miss you. And also, here's a little something extra.
Oh, thank you. I get to rebut that, though.
Oh, okay.
See, Clara's known for having the last word, but not every night. No, all I did for the CEVs was really provide some of the nuts and bolts. But the real drive that comes from the CEVs comes from especially the founders and originators and the people who've stuck with the program over the years. Clara being one, Dan Sorrentino is here, another. I don't know how these folks do it. See, I get paid. You folks are volunteers. That's where the real drive is coming from. And as important as disaster preparedness is in cities, it wasn't always that way. Trying to get heard or trying to get respect as CEVs over the years has grown, and we've incrementally gotten more respect for the abilities, and it's kind of indicative of when you see when you put on a disaster drill. People, I noticed in the disaster drills, were saying, well, what are the CEVs going to do? Can the CEVs do that? And so I think we've come a long ways from the beginning, and I admire Clara and some of the other, Dan, and some of the original founding members of the CEVs. And Randy is now taking over along with Scott, and I know they're going to do a wonderful job. Thank you.
Which leads us into our second introduction. Randy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These occasions are always happy ones, and I think it's an absolutely wonderful opportunity that we can take a moment out of our time and thank someone such as Captain John Murphy for all the fine work he's done over the years. But of course, to me, there's always a small touch of sadness because we're watching him transition to other duties, and we're like, God, who are we going to get to fill the shoes of that man? You know, that's a big pair of boots and turnout gear. But I'm delighted tonight to introduce Captain Scott Ferguson for two reasons. Number one, it lets me talk about one of my favorite volunteer organizations, perhaps in the whole world, and that's the Brisbane Community Emergency Volunteers. You'll see on our agenda that the next item we're going to have is a proclamation naming this month as California Earthquake Preparedness Month. And some folks will notice that. Some folks will pass right by it. Some folks will think, wow, you know, for 5 minutes they'll have a thought in their mind that perhaps I should prepare myself for disasters, be they earthquake, be they mud, be they fire, be they landslide, be they pandemic flus. But frankly, the community emergency volunteers do something about it all year long. And many of them have been doing it for as long as John Murphy's been their training coordinator and the provider of support to those folks. And they are truly going to be the unsung heroes if something happens to Brisbane. If we have a disaster, those are the folks who have taken the time out of their lives, who have volunteered freely without pay, as Captain Murphy mentioned, and go to the training, go to the exercises, and are prepared to help their neighbors. And so one of the things that I'd like to do again is remind everyone that we do in fact need to be prepared for disasters, and if you have a little bit of extra time to give, if you can possibly consider becoming a community emergency volunteer, we think that's a great thing for you to do. All you have to do is contact Engine 81 Firehouse and talk to Elizabeth Solis, and she'll be happy to give you that information. So now I get to introduce lucky Captain Scott Ferguson. Scott's actually been in the fire service since 1997. He joined the Brisbane Fire Department in 2000. 2005, he was promoted to captain, and I believe for most of those years you were on Captain Murphy's crew, right? Correct. So it's fair to say that you're Murphy trained. 4 out of 5. So for 4 out of 5, so it's a good thing for the CEVs. I think the CEVs are getting a quality product. You could go through Scott's certifications. He's trained in rescue systems, confined space rescue, trench rescue, fire instructor, fire command, investigation, fire management, the incident command system. He's obviously well qualified. I've spoken to him on numerous occasions about how this transition is going to occur, and I know he's highly motivated, so it's my pleasure to introduce Captain Scott Ferguson.
Thanks. I'm more than excited to take over and continue on with Captain Murphy's excellent training that he has done with the CEVs through the years. Like Randy was saying, I've been exposed to the CEVs and I've seen what they can do. Great opportunity for me as a young new captain to do some of the training that I've been trained to do. Part of the job that I do as a captain is to train firefighters, and I really look forward to continuing that with the emergency volunteers here in Brisbane. I think it's an excellent program. It's one of the best and biggest in the area. It really stands out on its own as a great program. The membership is huge in relation to the amount of people that live in this city, and I just hope I can continue on with John's work. And a great fire chief once wrote on a wall that change is inevitable, growth is optional. And we've got some new things coming up, some new training programs that I'd like to introduce, and maybe a little bit different way of doing some things, but the ultimate goal is to keep Brisbane safe in the event of the inevitable. It's, as we all know, not when it's going to happen, or it's not if it's going to happen, it's when. So thank you very much, and I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity. Thanks.
Scott, I suppose just as fair warning, when When John started with us in this job, he did not have gray hair.
He was about 12 at the time, or? Maybe I'll have some soon.
Terrific.
Thank you.
As long as we're doing proclamations and emergency preparedness, turns out that April is Earthquake Preparedness Month. Whereas the state has experienced lots of earthquakes, and whereas the governor has expressed his commitment to earthquake preparedness by proclaiming April as California Earthquake Preparedness Month, easy for me to say, and urging Californians to learn earthquake preparedness measures, and whereas the loss of life and property can be greatly reduced if appropriate earthquake preparedness measures are taken before, during, and after a damaging quake, and whereas these life-saving procedures will be highlighted during the month as the North County Fire Authority, San Mateo County Office of Emergency Services, City Emergency Services, and other service organizations provide earthquake safety information to Brisbane residents. And whereas it is highly recommended that our citizens become aware of the life-saving skills necessary to survive an earthquake through obtaining printed and web-based materials provided by the North County Fire Authority and the Office of Emergency Services. And whereas this important earthquake safety information should be studied and observed throughout the year in order to reduce injuries, loss of life, and property damage during an earthquake. Now we get to the good part. Now therefore, be resolved that the City Council of the City of Brisbane does hereby proclaim April 2007 as California Earthquake Preparedness Month and encourages all Brisbane citizens to increase their knowledge of and awareness of property safety measures to follow before, during, and after an earthquake. Terrific.
All right. You know, given that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to have Randy Bro, if possible, kind of give a little spiel on preparedness, since we have a lot of people here and a lot of people probably watching at home.
Sure, absolutely, sir. One of the biggest things I'd like to highlight for Earthquake Preparedness Month is that the city continues to sell the Red Cross first aid preparedness kits at a steep discount. You'll recall that about a year and a half ago we purchased them. We were able to purchase them in bulk and get them shipped in bulk, and on top of that we took a 10% discount off of the price we paid, and that's the price we're selling it at. So if you come down to City Hall, you can come over to the Public Works counter and pay for it in finance. You'll get one of those picked up. This has been a busy year for us. One of the things that's happened is we've all been trying to get involved and integrated into the NIM system, into the federal system, transitioning not away from SIMS, but to something supplementary to SIMS. We've been working, improving the physical upgrades and characteristics of our EOC. We've been on assignment to find a secondary, perhaps a mobile EOC or an EOC located at a different location. We've improved some of the communications capabilities that we have in there. We've picked up a satellite phone. We've picked up a laptop computer that has wireless capability, continuing to work on those type of operations. And it just continues to go on. We've got another semi-aggressive year going on this year. We've got a tabletop half-day pandemic exercise that's occurring that myself, the city manager, the deputy director of the EOC, and the planning section chief of the EOC are attending. All of the section chiefs have assignments that have been suggested to them from a list and they've voluntarily taken on. And the thing to note is that all of the people doing this work in the city of Brisbane really do it as staff members, as other duties as assigned. You know, nobody here is a 100% directed Office of Emergency Service personnel, and somehow we managed to get it all done. So we thank the council for their support, and certainly the city manager for his support and understanding, as we occasionally have to take 30 or 40 people away to go off and do some training.
Great. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you all very much. We're going to move now to oral communications, but if any of the fire staff are present and would like to gracefully skip out, this would be the time. And our first request to speak for oral communications is Madison Davis.
Already? Honorable Mayor and City Council members, on behalf of the 114 students who will grace the stage this May in Brisbane Dance Workshop's production of How Night Came from the Sea, I thank all of you for supporting us for 25 amazing years. Without your contributions, we couldn't have produced such phenomenal shows each year. I can't begin to describe the opportunities and skills Brisbane Dance Workshop has provided me, as well as every other student who has participated in the classes BDW offers. I have grown up dancing with BDW, looking forward to class each week. And when you're in high school, dealing with homework and tests and all the other struggles teenagers have, it's relieving to have a safe haven where I can release all of my emotions and escape a hectic schedule. To show our appreciation, we'd love for all of you to join us for a special benefit performance on Saturday, May 12th. And we'd be honored if any of you would like to perform in our show as a Spotlight Star. Our previous Spotlight Stars have been Clay Holstein, John Mazza, Nancy Rozier, Cliff Lentz, and my dad, Ron Davis, just to name a few. All you need to do is contact Camille. Her number is 467-6698. It's that simple. Thank you so much for all you have done to keep the arts alive.
I have a motion, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to nominate Cy Boligoff as a Spotlight Star.
Do I hear a second to that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll never miss it.
Well, at the risk of being less dramatic, is there anyone else who would like to
We have
speak
one other,
during oral communications? Now, Chris is going to speak on the
okay.
tree matters that are before us. Anyone else on oral communications? Okay, we'll move on to the consent calendar.
I'd like to remove item E.
And I'd like to remove item A.
Move approval of B, C, D.
Second.
B, C, and D. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? Item A then?
On page 5, the fourth paragraph, it talks about a company named Field of Dreams. It's actually Big League Dreams. That's my only change. That's okay. And with that, I would move approval of the minutes of February 5th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right. That leaves item, which item is it we've got left?
E.
D?
E.
E.
E is in Edward. Just a question I have on the supplemental appropriation. It didn't say where it was coming from. Is that out of the general fund? or-
Yeah, yes, it would be the general fund.
Okay. All right. With that, I'll move approval of item E.
I'll give you a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded?
You know what, there's another question I had on that, even though we approved it, though. With this 18,000, I mean, we're looking at, it's the same kind of roof that we have, similar to the marina, the swimming pool. I mean, it's long sheets. I mean, it just doesn't seem like it'd be reasonable to have to replace the whole thing.
I'll let
You know.
the city engineer respond to that.
Yes, sir, we're not talking about replacing the structure of the roof, the beams and such, if you will, but we're looking at the roofing system that's on it. And one of the things that I specifically asked Glass Architects to do was to bring in a consultant who's a specialist in roofing systems. It seems that this EPDM system that was originally put on it, this bonded plastic rubber system, is not doing its job. Obviously, it's been leaking before I got here, and I've been here 6 years now. So that's one of the things we'd like him to do, is particularly to look at, because of the way the building was designed, and I wasn't here, so I don't understand the paradigm for it, but there is some desire to have some interesting aesthetics to it. So it's got lots of shapes and angles, and it's pleasing to look at, but I think it's difficult to put the type of roofing system on it to keep it watertight. So that's one of the first items of work we wanted to look at, is to figure out what would be the most appropriate system to put on there. But we're not talking about tearing out the beams and such.
Lifting off, they're big panels, so
The metal panels will remain as well.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So can we move on to old business now?
Yes, thank you.
Item A on old business is consider directing staff to draft an urgency ordinance to prohibit formula retail stores in central Brisbane. Who is going to report on this one?
I think it's me. Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, there was some discussion some time ago expressing concern about the possibility of formula stores being established in the central, downtown Brisbane area. This subject was specifically discussed by the Council Retail Land Use Committee, and the recommendation was made by the committee, which is being carried forward through this memo, to pursue the issue of regulation. And while that matter is being studied, it's our desire to preserve the status quo so that we have an opportunity to address that subject without the threat of some application being filed and having to deal with the matter. State law does allow a city to impose a moratorium on specific land uses to give the city time and the peace and quiet, if you will, to consider an issue and adopt new and permanent zoning regulations. We're not sure how those regulations are going to look, but they will go through the whole public process as an amendment to the zoning ordinance. So what staff is proposing now is authorization from the council to come back, hopefully at your next meeting, with an urgency ordinance that would be effective immediately, that would impose an outright ban on all formula retail stores. The memo does describe what is meant by formula retail, and I think is generally understood what is meant by that. It's multiple stores having common characteristics, whether it's a menu, facade, colors, logo, or the like. There will be a more detailed definition of those elements of a formula store contained in the urgency ordinance. The ordinance would prohibit the establishment of any formula retail store during the period in which it is effective. You can have a moratorium that would allow interim uses or whatever, but I think here the problem is there hasn't really been a decision by the community as to how we're going to address this subject. Most cities that have considered the subject of retail stores have very often required a use permit with special tailor-made findings. San Francisco is probably the largest city in the state to adopt regulations, and they distinguish by individual neighborhoods and even individual blocks. So you'll have addresses and block numbers. And in some areas of the city, they're allowed without any restriction whatsoever. In other areas of the city, there's a use permit required with special findings that need to be made. And in a couple neighborhoods, they're prohibited altogether. So there are a variety of ways in which this can be handled, and I think that's to be determined through deliberations, first at the Planning Commission, through public hearings, and then ultimately by the City Council as part of the normal process for adoption of a zoning amendment. The moratorium would have an initial period of 45 days. It would be effective immediately upon adoption. Within that 45-day period, we need to bring it back to the Council for a public hearing, and it would then be extended for an additional time to equal an initial period of 1 year. If we haven't completed the process by that time, you can further extend the moratorium for another year. And I would remind the Council this is exactly the process that we used when we adopted regulations in Crocker Park pertaining to freight forwarders, when there was a concern about an excessive number of freight forwarders coming in and replacing other types of uses. We started with a moratorium. It did take us a considerable period of time to develop regulations, which we did, and then those permanent regulations replaced the moratorium. And that is the same process that's being proposed here. So basically all we're asking the Council to do tonight is express its concurrence with that approach and authorize staff to come back with an urgency ordinance that would impose the moratorium. And then we would start with the whole legislative process of dealing with the issue of formula retail stores. And I would emphasize that that is going to be a regular zoning amendment. It will be initially through the Planning Commission. There will be all opportunities for members of the public to express their views and for the Planning Commission to consider options, and then for the whole proposal to come to the City Council. So we're just beginning that process, and because it is time-consuming, we don't want to have some application for a use come in while this is going on. So this would simply say to any establishment that is a retail store, we're looking at the issue, and until we made a decision how we want to handle it, we're not going to allow anything to come in right now, and we'll figure out later how that's going to be handled. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from council?
I have two questions.
Go ahead, Clark.
Well, actually, it's one question. I mean, split up into two parts. Subway sandwich shop, that's considered a formula?
Subway would be a formula. Formula is defined as multiple stores having uniform characteristic. Subway is kind of a classic type of formula store. One of the things we'll be looking at, we have one formula store, and one of the factors, for example, in the cities that have adopted this type of ordinance is shooting for a mix of uses, which would not necessarily exclude formula stores, but avoid a situation where they tend to predominate. So we have one, and I think one issue as well, if we're going to consider others, is there going to be some limit on how many additional formula stores we might want to have?
How about Brisbane Hardware?
No, that's a single store would not be a formula store. And one of the issues I think the council needs to decide, and we could appreciate some guidance tonight, is what sort of number you want to use to define a formula store. I believe San Francisco has something like 11. I was suggesting a lower number because Brisbane is certainly much smaller, maybe somewhere between 5 and 10. But one aspect of a formula store is that there are multiple stores having the same, they may be franchises, but externally they look to be the same. You walk in and the menu is the same, the facade is the same, furniture may be the same, decor or whatever. And the multiple existence of these stores is one of the key aspects that defines a formula. So one of the things we have to watch out for is there are people in town who own more than one establishment. They may be different, but still, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about local people owning, two different food establishments, for example. We're talking about formula stores, and the reason they are singled out is they somehow have, in some respects, some advantages over locally owned businesses in the sense that they've got greater marketing power, usually greater financing to come in and establish in a market. And those are all factors that need to be looked at when we consider regulation. So I guess my recommendation for formula for purposes of the urgency ordinance would be some number between 5 and 10 that would go into that urgency ordinance. That may not be the number we end up with, but for immediate purposes, because we're trying to be exclusive rather than inclusive in terms of keeping out something, I would recommend a fairly low number.
Well, the reason I asked about Brisbane Hardware is they carry Ace brand, and that's considered a formula, isn't it? Maybe, yeah.
Ace Hardware is actually a buying cooperative. So it's not a franchise such as a Baskin-Robbins ice cream shop would be. So that's the difference between, and that's part of I think part of the difficulty in crafting exactly what we're going to be looking at in the upcoming ordinance.
Okay, that's good to know.
And I'm assuming that we're talking about an ordinance that would not impact any store that is already here.
No.
That's correct, right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Other council questions?
Not a question, but I'll make a comment. I'm on the subcommittee with Michael in this subcommittee, and I do believe we talked about 8, the size that we talked about. Am I on the right track?
I don't think we came to a conclusion. What number?
Well, I'd like to make a recommendation that maybe 8 is good.
8?
Anything more than 8 and above.
Well, I mean,
I assume you're talking about any store which has 8 units or above.
Correct. That to be
Are
considered.
there other council questions or comments?
There's one other thing I ought to clarify, I just noticed I didn't mention, and that's the area that would be covered. And essentially, that's the NCR01 and NCR02 zoning districts, which dovetail very nicely into the area we want to protect. And what we're talking about is all of Visitation Avenue on both sides of the street, including the commercial establishment at the end of the street, and the development now being constructed at 1 San Bruno, and it would also include the Brisbane Village. So that essentially is the downtown core commercial area that would be covered by the moratorium.
So if we adopted like this 5 to 10 or what, 8, or that Seppi's talking about, is that how many stores could be allowed as formula stores?
No, that would define what a formula store is. So if you have somebody who has, let's say, 4 stores, that wouldn't be classified as a formula. That's just someone who owns multiple businesses and runs the same. Formula stores typically are many, many stores. Right, and even if you say 8, the way the ordinance would be phrased is 8 wherever located. Whether they're all located in California or spread around nationwide, it's the number of stores and not the location. One of the things we have to be careful about here is that we're not discriminating against interstate commerce. And one of the features that the courts have looked at to uphold ordinances like that is that it doesn't matter whether the stores are located all in California or located elsewhere. We're not trying to keep out a national chain necessarily. We're trying to keep out an operation that has multiple stores, even though all of the same character, even though all of them may happen to be located within the state of California.
Right. Okay.
I have a request for public comment from Michael Schuman.
Michael Schuman, thank you, City Council, for looking at this. There are a number of people who also came, and we wanted to let you know that we support both the moratorium and you're taking action on this. And I think that if the feeling was that the council was undecided about this, I think a lot more people would get up and speak, but we don't want to take too much time here. So as a representative of a group of people, I'd like to thank you and again support the passage of this moratorium.
Thank you. Do we have a...
I make the motion to approve.
What is your motion?
To direct the staff to come up with an urgency ordinance to prohibit formula retail stores in central Brisbane. And if you want to have a number, then I give the number, but we haven't decided that.
You'll get a chance before we vote, Clara. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's further public comment. Clara?
Clara Johnson, I appreciate the city attorney's comments that answered a lot of questions for me, but I have a couple of questions about how, I realize this relates to Central Brisbane and the 2 NCROs, but what do you intend, or do you intend to do anything on the areas outside of those? In other words, how will the formula store issue be answered in Sierra Point and on the Baylands? And I'm aware of one study of downtown Brisbane done back when Carol was the planning director, and that study showed that most of the businesses in Brisbane are they simply sustain the people who run them. They don't grow, and the reason why people sometimes can stay in business is because they have family members who work for nothing. And I think that needs to be taken into account. Former Mayor Miller always used to say it's the marketplace. Well, I think if you're going to do something like this, which is going to discourage possible businesses to come here, I would suggest that you might want to consider things that people will hate or something like it's either a business district or bringing the redevelopment agency into town so that you can create a false market in order to allow local businesses to stay in business. You do that with the Silver Spot Nursery School by giving them really substandard rent, and that's a social benefit that we all support, but maybe there's a social benefit in thinking about how you can support local businesses rather than just the idea of passing a law that says that certain businesses can't come. It means that Whole Foods couldn't come here. Places, these are my favorites. Whole Foods, Trader Joe's couldn't come here. Pete's Coffee couldn't come here. And it's kind of, it's a balance. It's a difficult decision. I just would like you to think about other issues besides regulation. I think the use permit with special findings sounds like a good way to go. And just please consider how much trouble we have with economic activity here. We have a difficult time sustaining businesses. And if you say, well, you're a successful business, so you can't come here, it isn't going to improve too much unless you figure out a way to create a false marketplace and you support local businesses. Thank you.
Claire, thank you. That's an appropriate observation, and I think one that we'll deal with in greater substance when we look at an actual proposed ordinance, which we'll have on next time.
Thank you very much.
Any other comment? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Contrary? Okay. That item.
Oh, I did have one question, and that is, when is the next business meeting where an urgency ordinance might be voted on?
Your next scheduled meeting is May 21st.
May 21st, so that's over a month from now, and
It's 5 weeks. It's we got an extra Monday, so it's 5 weeks instead of 4.
Are there any applications right now for formula stores in Brisbane?
No, we don't have any applications now.
the question is it conceivable that we would get one in a 5-week period? And that's kind of my concern.
Anything's possible. Do you want to have a special meeting for that subject?
Sure, I do.
I would do that.
It just so happens that you have a meeting or a date available on April 30th because we had moved some meetings around.
I won't be here.
I think we're of the view that we'll go with our regular meeting on May 25th.
Yes. Unless there's an emergency, something that we have to have special
So
meeting.
the next meeting that we do have, I assume, is on the Baylands. Am I correct? Or is there a...
There's a general plan meeting, I believe, you have the calendar, next Monday.
And is it possible to have this item on that agenda?
I won't be here.
And I'm not sure that Councilman Volgoff will be here next Monday either.
Oh, okay.
I'm hearing May 21st again.
I'm running out of Mondays here.
It'd have to be the first Monday in May.
You know, by the time someone submits an app, first of all, we're not aware of any application. If somebody was to submit an application, by the time it takes us to review it and determine that it's complete, we could probably have the ordinance in effect. There also is some law that says if the city is in the process of amending its ordinance, it can kind of not withhold, we can withhold approval of something because it knows it's going to be in violation of that ordinance. So I think we can find a way to avoid someone slipping in under the wire at the last minute. There's no one knocking at the door at the moment.
You don't have to
So
worry about that.
hearing that,
Well, put it this way, if we get some rumblings, we'll send the word out and suggest a meeting.
staff has its direction to go ahead and draft the ordinance, and barring some unforeseen event, we will have a first reading on the 21st. Okay, item B on old business. Consider awarding the construction contract for the Glen Park Sewer Rehabilitation Project to Casey Construction in the amount of $187,000 and change.
Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, good evening again. This project and the recommended action will award the construction contract to rehabilitate the last remaining segment of 6-inch sewer line that was identified in the city's 2003 sewer master plan as having structural defects and being under capacity. So we're here tonight to ask you to approve the contract. The council will recall that you previously approved the plans and specifications in your February meeting. It's been out to bid. You see the bids that were received, and I'll be happy to answer any questions for you.
Are there any questions?
Just, where's the supplemental appropriation of $50,000? Where's that coming from?
From the utility fund, sir.
Utility fund? Do
Yes,
we
sir.
have the money in there?
Yes, sir, we do. Stuart nodded. That's
For the record, Stuart's nod will be
entered into the record.
noted. Any public comment?
I move we award the construction contract for Glen Parkway Sewer Rehabilitation Project to Casey Construction and approve the supplemental appropriation of $50,000.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Seppi beat you to it.
Okay.
Oh,
that's
well,
good.
no, I can give it to him, doesn't matter.
No, you beat me to it.
You beat him to it. You beat
Okay,
me to
got it.
All in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Now we'll move on to new business. Item A, consider approval of a supplemental appropriation of $12,000 to fund the installation of a new secondary dog trap, in quotes, and parking near the west end of the dog park.
Yes, sir. This is an item that staff was asked to bring forward, and the purpose of it is to install a dog trap. And I'm not sure what other word that you would come up with for that, but it's the little low fence area that's got gates on either end, so you can let your canine companion in on one end, close the gate, and then go to the other gate and wrestle with the other dogs that are coming up to join your buddy to play, and not have them all get out in the street. So
It's
that's,
essentially the same thing that we have on the east end.
yes, sir. That's exactly what it is. Essentially, it'll be slightly smaller in size. We don't have quite the room there, but the improvements that we need to make to do that, obviously, is the installation of some fencing. We need to fix the material down there so that it's not permeable, so that you could walk on it. It won't get muddy and destroyed. And we're also proposing to install some parking spaces along that area there. That'll serve two purposes. Number one, it will give those folks who would like to come down and begin the Crocker industrial trail there, who'd like to drive their car down and park, they'll have access to that trailhead. And it will also, during City Hall remodel, we anticipate that access through the parking lot is not going to be allowed, so you wouldn't be able to get to the east end dog trap, and this is sort of coming ahead of that and putting that dog trap in on the other end so people can still park and still get to the dog trap during City Hall construction. And of course, they can do it now too if there's overflow in the City Hall parking lot.
Dog trap somehow doesn't sound right.
Or it should be dog gentle carrying device or something. Yes, sir. It's
I
not
move
a snap
approval.
thing.
Is there a second?
Second, okay, go ahead.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
As part of this project, can we recover some of the sod that gets removed down where the new trap is going to go in and put it in the middle of the dog park where it's chewed up? Is that possible?
If it is, we'll do it, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, item B, consider adoption of resolution 0704, approving the request of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission by the City of Brisbane for an allocation of Transportation Development Act pedestrian and bicycle project funding for the fiscal year 2007 and 2008.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes, sir. This is my last one, I think, for a while. Absolutely delighted to bring this one to you. This is a project that we've been working on for nearly 3 years now. It's the second time that we've gone through the application process. And what this approval of this resolution will do is allow the city to accept a $550,000 grant so that we can install a Class 2 bikeway from our southern city limits all the way to the central part of town. And a Class 2 bikeway, by definition, is a bike lane that's dedicated for bikes and pedestrians, and that's separated by appropriate traffic calming devices from automobile traffic. And the appropriate traffic calming devices in this case are going to be 2 sets of shoulder striping. Between those 2 sets of shoulder stripe, there are going to be rumble strips to prevent those accidental runoffs, and we're also going to have the traditional reflective pavement markers that you'd see there. We're going to be putting in a pretty significant amount of pavement because we're going to create a 5-foot wide path or bikeway for bicyclists and pedestrians to use. And we're also going to be leveling out a lot of what we've got out there. If you go out there and try and ride that route right now or walk it, you'll see that a lot of the cross slope is much greater than 2%, and we're going to bring it all up to 2%. So I'm really happy to bring this to you. From my perspective, the decision for the council is you can either approve the resolution and get the $550,000, or you can not approve the resolution and you don't get the $550,000. So I'll be happy to take questions on that.
Tough to see.
So moved.
Second, but I have a comment though also.
Please.
The city engineer and his staff, they did a fantastic job, and they stuck with this project even after it was not funded during the first cycle. And the entire Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee at the county level has always been impressed with Randy, and in particular his bike shorts. And I think...
Meanwhile, he's wearing them.
A rough crowd tonight, sir. And I'm here. At least Councilmember Boligoff's not
That's
here.
probably enough comment on the bike shorts.
But also engineer Matt Lee did a fantastic job with a video a year ago or 2 years ago.
Yes, sir, it was 2 years.
And put together a DVD that was presented to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So this project has had a lot of great engineering and presentation at the county level. And I think it's fantastic that we're getting $500,000 for bicycle projects in Brisbane. Thank you, Randy, and your staff.
Thanks for your kind words, sir.
There was a motion and a second, was there not?
Yeah.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Good job, Randy.
Now, item C, consider adoptions for eucalyptus tree removals in central Brisbane and provide direction to staff. Mr. Smith.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is an item that staff was requested to bring to the council some options for looking at some of the stands of eucalyptus trees that exist in central Brisbane. Eucalyptus trees, as you know, are non-native species to San Bruno Mountain. They're considered kind of a weedy species and add considerably to the fire fuel load in the community. I think the intent here is to maybe look at some of these problem areas and try to maybe see if we can get a handle on some of these areas before the fire season starts next year. As you know, the city has hired Davy Resource Group to do kind of an inventory of the urban forest on both public and private lands in Brisbane and to assist the city in developing kind of an overall long-term management plan. But this item was brought forth I think in an effort to kind of maybe get a jump on that process and be proactive and try to get something out there ahead of the fire season. So staff was asked to look at a number of identified sites. A couple of them have been kind of floating out there for some time. Number one, the grove along both sides of San Mateo Lane. There's about 16 trees total on that site. Most of them are on the right side of the roadway as you go up the hill. And that's a grouping of trees. It's been kind of a maintenance issue for the city for a number of years. The neighbors on both sides of San Mateo Lane have lodged complaints about those trees over the years, and the size of that grove has been gradually reduced back due to, by city maintenance efforts, but I think there's still some problems there. In terms of a project that's maybe the most accessible and most doable, I think that one would probably have the most bang for the buck in terms of all these options. The other site that was identified was a site between 108 and 136 Trinity Road, and I think this site came up during the eucalyptus removal that the city did last year down at the far end of Trinity Road, and I think this little subsection of trees was identified at the time, and it was felt that since these trees are kind of next to the road, they may be on the public right-of-way, and maybe it might be useful to also address these trees. These are located fairly close to some private structures and some utility lines. Unfortunately, investigation and the best available survey maps that the city has of the right-of-way indicate that these 5 trees are located just outside the city right away on the adjacent private property. So that raised a number of issues which I'll address a little bit later in my presentation. The third site we looked at was the kind of the tail, as you will, of the community park as it narrows down past the restroom building on the way out to Bayshore Boulevard. There's approximately 75 eucalyptus trees kind of between San Francisco Avenue and Old County Road. And they kind of divide into sort of two groups. One is looks like a row of trees that was planted. It's about half the trees. The other half kind of looked like they probably were volunteers of that original line of planted trees that established themselves as the seeds rolled down the hill and colonized the hillside naturally. So this site was kind of selected because this is entirely on city-owned property, and so you don't have issues of rights of access and spending of public funds for addressing trees that are on private property that you have on this other site. The fourth site that we looked at was some city-owned lots at the upper end of Paul Avenue. There's about a 6/10 of an acre parcel that includes, includes the property that was recently donated by Mr. Pannone. Is adjacent to that, but that whole parcel is fairly, it was naturally an oak woodland, but it's fairly heavily infested with eucalyptus. And so growing out through the oaks in that area, there's quite a few eucalyptus trees. There's some complicating issues to this in terms of kind of figuring out exactly where the city's property lines are in that area. So I think this particular site is going to need a little more study until we can find how feasible it is to get up there and what the cost might be. I wasn't able to get cost estimates for any of these at the time of the writing of this report. However, I did get a transmittal from Davey Tree Service today by fax, and I've provided copies with you and put them on the council desk, so you have those. The cost estimates for the San Mateo Lane site is approximately $12,000 to remove the 16 eucalyptus trees, and if the city wants the stumps ground out, that would be an additional $1,780. The Trinity Road site, it's hugely expensive. It's about $59,000 for the 5 trees at that location, and I'm kind of shocked at this price, but when I talked to the representative, they're very large trees, they're very close to adjacent structures and also very close to adjacent power lines. So I think what the reason for this is that if these trees were to be removed, every piece of wood would have to be lowered by rope, by hand, by climbing crews in the trees. So I think that's probably what accounts for that. The San Francisco Avenue site, the community park site, the row of trees along San Francisco Avenue would be approximately $19,500. Removal of the stumps in that location would be another $1,260. And then well, this says 71 remaining, but it's actually about 35 remaining. Trees to be about $31,000 at that location. In terms of removal of trees on private property, unless the condition of the trees is such that they could be declared a public nuisance, if that were the case, then the city could order those trees abated as a nuisance abatement. But in that case, the property owner would be ordered to perform the work at their own expense. That would be similar to the weed abatement program through the fire department. I think it's, we haven't looked at all of the conditions that would be necessary to whether those trees could be declared a public nuisance or not. I think that's going to require some additional study. I think we need to involve Davey Resource Group and also our own North County Fire Department in terms of seeing if we can make the findings to require these to be abated as a public nuisance. These are very expensive abatement orders that the city would be issuing, and so you've got issues of ordering people to do something that could potentially cost them $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. So I think that's something that, you know, we'd have to look fairly carefully at before taking that course. I guess another issue is, could the city facilitate something like this on private property? And, you know, if the property owner wanted to go ahead and do it, that's fine. They would just have to get a tree removal permit. If the city wanted to facilitate it, if the property owner didn't have the funding to do the job, the city, I suppose, could, there's a number of options the city could consider.
Fred,
Council.
why would they need to get a permit if it's a eucalyptus tree?
Because, well, under the revisions to the tree protection ordinance, any tree larger than 30 inches in circumference requires a tree removal permit.
It does?
If it's not one of the 8 categories of protected trees, then it's a ministerial permit. But it's just it replaces a procedure that was, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent, but the old ordinance had a procedure where it didn't require a permit, but you had to come in with a notice of intention to remove a tree, and then the city had 3 days to issue a ruling whether it was a protected tree or not, and they couldn't cut the tree down without the letter telling them that they didn't need a permit.
And in any case, it lets the city know
Right.
that it's under consideration.
So if it's a eucalyptus tree, it's an automatic permit, and it's not a permit. It'll be like if you want a building permit and you meet all the zoning and building code requirements, it's a ministerial permit. It can't be denied, and it can't be, no conditions can be imposed upon it. It just kind of gives us a means to where we can require a look at it, and the city can determine whether it's a protected tree or not.
Sure, okay.
Okay. So let's see. So a number of options that the City Council may wish to consider if you want to look at facilitating, assisting property owners to remove trees on private property, would be the city could advance the funds and have the work done at its expense under an agreement with the property owner to repay the city over a period of time. Another option would be if the person was, say, property rich but cash poor, or if they were a senior or something like that, the city could do the work. If the property owner was not in a position to, implement a repayment schedule with the city could place like a silent lien on the property, where the cost could be recovered at the time either the property is sold or it's transferred to the owner's heirs. And it would be similar to the first-time homebuyer program, where you have this silent loan. It's a lien against the property, and there's some formula for accumulating interest, and so that the city recovers its cost at some point in the future. And we're not providing a gift of public funds to the property owner. So those are some of the options that the council may wish to consider if you want to look at some of these sites that are on private property.
That pretty much it?
Yeah, I guess the only one other thing I want to mention in terms of the recommendation, in terms of the community park site, is that staff would be recommending that that's a fairly large number of trees on a very visible location. Staff would suggest possibly if the council wishes to tackle that project be phased, one, to reduce the impact, and two, to kind of to allow for perhaps some replanting of replacement trees that might be indigenous to San Bruno Mountain, and restore the character to more of an indigenous, native character, with perhaps some oaks and buckeyes and things at that site to replace the eucalyptus.
Any other questions for Mr. Smith?
I just wanted to summarize what I understand, and particularly the cost estimate that we got tonight. So if we go with removal of the entire 171 trees in these 3 locations, 171 would cost us about $125,440. And if we go do a survey, there would be additional cost on the top of that. And I understand this item is not in the budget.
Right.
Would we be able to have a supplemental in this fiscal year to accommodate that?
You can do that, yes.
Probably depends on how much you want to do and where you want to take it.
That's good.
Other question, Clark?
Yeah, I do. Actually, a couple things. On One of the things it doesn't have on here, I think, is probably one of the greater needs is the trees on San Bruno Avenue in the back, the eucalyptus trees, the widowmakers, I guess they call them. Those, I remember one year, it's like 97, 96, I was driving down there, driving down the back of San Bruno, and about 40 feet before I got to one spot, one of them just sheared, I mean, just dropped like that, a branch.
You're talking about going downhill on San Bruno just before you get to Bayshore.
Side, yeah. And just dropped, I mean, it would have crushed my car. I mean, it was that big of a branch. And I feel those trees are probably, you know, I mean, that's the heaviest traveled route out of everything that we've presented tonight. The trees on San Francisco Street don't seem to be as high a priority to me, because they're putting up the soldier beam piling wall there. You drop those trees, we're going to be looking at an ugly wall. You know, I'd rather see the eucalyptus trees until we come up with a plan as to what we're going to actually do. And I've been working with a citizen here in Brisbane who's actually developing a plan, which I'm going to present to the city manager as far as planting with native wildflowers and stuff like that in those areas. And that's something that, you know, I think that we want to come up with before we just go whacking away, is really come up with a plan, because kind of like what Seppi was saying, is this is already, with what we presented tonight and perhaps San Bruno Avenue, if this is what we're going to look at, is already over $100,000, which I think Davy Tree is probably the cream of the crop, and they charge the highest.
Yes.
And since we're getting to that point, I think that we should put this out to competitive bid.
Yes.
First, we come up with a plan, and I think the highest priority actually is up in the hill. If we want to reduce fire load, that's where we need to look at, reducing fire load, because that's where the most dangerous fires are going to be, up in the hills, you know, up behind you. So I think that probably would be the priority, but I think we need to come up with a plan, a tree removal plan, and then not necessarily come up with a supplemental appropriation, but look at it in our next budget session of next year to put this on, and then also what we're going to plant too, because that's going to have to be added in there, because if we're going to look at planting native oaks or buckeyes, can't necessarily see some buckeye. Those are pretty desolate looking tree. I mean, it's not a real attractive tree. I think some of the willow trees and the oak trees are a lot nicer.
Clark, let me interrupt it at this moment.
Okay.
If we ever get a bid or bids and start looking at removing eucalyptus above where I live, I would have a conflict of interest and will not vote. We don't have such a bid tonight, so I'm, having talked with the city attorney, I'm going to be discussing this subject in general, but not voting with respect to that particular property.
Yeah.
I have 2 requests for public comment.
Yeah, I'll continue. Go ahead and hear from the public, and then, you know, I still got more to say about it, so.
Chris Evers. 200 Kings, right in the middle.
200 Kings. I am the person who lives directly below the lot that Mr. Pannone donated to the city, and the person who looks up and sees all of the tinder-dry eucalyptus bark all summer, and watches when we have a wildfire and hoses my roof and worries about what will happen if the fire gets into those trees. So I would, from a fire standpoint, strongly urge you to consider taking the eucalyptus down on that lot. And the other thing that no one has discussed is what's basically the ecological impact that the eucalyptus are having in that woodland. I mean, Clark, you sort of got into that. The eucalyptus down at the end of town, at the entrance to town, may be unsightly, and it would be great to take them down and put up native plants, but that would be a huge project. If you were to take the eucalyptus down at the end of Paul, what you would be doing is preventing enormous trees from growing and spreading and smothering an existing diverse oak, bay, buckeye, toyon woodland. I would assume that your staff report probably got into the ecology of eucalyptus and what they do. Essentially, they secrete acids and other organic compounds that prevent the native species from growing underneath them. If you don't have information about this, I have a bunch of scientific papers that I can give you showing that biodiversity is greatly decreased by these trees. One of the most wonderful things about this town is looking up and seeing these beautiful oak-covered hills. And right now, when you look up, you see beautiful oak-covered hills up to this stand of eucalyptus, which is growing. I mean, I've been here 16 years. The trees have only gotten higher. They've gotten larger. They've spread. It's going to keep happening. The city owns a huge portion of the acres up there. And I really I think it would be a tragedy if you didn't take an opportunity to protect this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Michelle Salmon.
Michelle Salmon, Brisbane resident. I have a couple of issues, and I'd like to separate, as you need to, Steve, the part about the trees that are on at the end of Paul Avenue and the other eucalyptus trees. First of all, I know that eucalyptus is a weedy species, as all non-native trees are. But in this day of global warming, I think that the tree canopy is more important than ever, even if it is eucalyptus. To think about replacing the trees on San Francisco Street with native trees, it'll take about 300 years for a California live oak or a buckeye or a bay tree to get to that size of canopy and process the amount of carbon dioxide that those trees are currently processing, plus the amount of noise they block from the freeway, and plus, as Clark said, if we cut down the trees on San Francisco Street, it'll be pretty unsightly and a lot noisier and a lot less attractive than it is now, even though they're eucalyptus. The trees on San Francisco Street are historical trees in my mind because they are the demarcation for the old road traveling south from San Francisco down the peninsula and on down California. You'll see these stands of eucalyptus that were planted a very long time ago, long before I was born. The trees on San Mateo Lane should be pruned, but I don't think they should be removed. I think the trees on the backside of San Bruno Avenue should be pruned, but I don't think they should be removed. And the trees up on Paul Avenue, I think the trees on Trinity should also be pruned, but I also don't think that they should be removed. And the trees on Paul Avenue, it's true that they do suppress other plants from growing under them, and it's really a double-edged sword because they've also provided a seed barrier from invasives moving across the upper part of Brisbane and replacing the oak forest. So removing those trees it's a double-edged sword and needs to be carefully thought out, and the whole ecology of that area needs to be looked at. Yes, it's a fire hazard now because it's been let to get out of control. Eucalyptus, like most non-endemic species, they came here with human intervention, and they require human intervention to continue to be productive and healthy. And we have not taken care of those trees the way that they've needed to be taken care of. Would you think about cutting down the remaining 3 eucalyptus trees that are in the middle of the park just because they're eucalyptus? One of them already got cut down because it got damaged by partygoers and then was cut to the ground and has never been replaced. So you can talk about cutting these trees down, but what's your plan for replacing them? If you talk about removing non-natives from Brisbane, well, we all might as well pack up and leave because we're all non-natives. So we really need an urban management program, not a weed whacking job of eucalyptus just because they happen to be what's growing there. I think that this requires a lot more consideration than just hacking them down. And I have to say that I kind of when I read the report that was filed with the city, there were some parts that I kind of took objection to, especially on the San Francisco Avenue part where it says, most notably, this parcel is highly visible at the main entrance to town. And some residents, me, may have concerns about the removal of so many trees at this location. The impact of the project could be mitigated, you mean hidden from the public view, by breaking the project into 2 or more phases. It would be logical to remove the straight line of trees along San Francisco Avenue as the first phase and remove the trees on the bluffs below at the second phase. So basically, most people wouldn't notice you were removing the trees on the first phase until you got to the second phase. It could also be more acceptable to the public if the eucalyptus removal was conceived as part of a restoration project that included planting of such replacement trees at the site. Trees that are indigenous to San Bruno Mountain, such as live oaks, buckeyes, and bay trees. I don't think any of those 3 species would grow there very well because they're all canyon trees that require a lot more moisture than what you get up on a windy bluff like that. A public information and input process may also be helpful to create consensus for this project. But I think people need to know before you cut down the trees of what you're contemplating on all these areas. I only casually looked at the agenda that I got just a few days ago and went, oh my God, they're thinking about taking out those trees. And I really think that people need to know that before they do. I can remember when I was a little girl, about maybe 4 or 5 years old, coming home one day, and one of the merchants on Visitation Avenue had cut down all of the trees on Visitation Avenue because they blocked the sign for his store. Okay? And one time we went on vacation, we came back, and somebody had cut down a bunch of trees along San Bruno Avenue, the backside of San Bruno Avenue, without any public input. And my father was on the city council. They waited till he was on vacation. And so I think that the public really needs to be aware that we're contemplating taking out these valuable, I think they're a valuable resource, trees. And I'm separating the Paul Avenue issue because that is up in a fire-type habitat, and it's been let to run out of control. But I think the trees on San Mateo Lane, the trees on San Francisco Street certainly, the trees on Trinity should be pruned. And a tree management program doesn't mean whacking them all to the ground and leaving them, like what happened with the tree in the park. I think we need to really take a step back and look at the overall management of the urban forest. Some of this money could be better used putting into a long-term maintenance program for all of the trees in Brisbane that need pruning, and not just taking out the easy ones. So thank you for listening, and I hope you really think wisely before you go ahead and do this. I completely object to taking out those trees. Thank you.
Mike Rodman.
Hi, my name is Mike Rodman at 125 Kings Road. I would just like to discuss, I found out about this very, very late, but I decided I wanted at least to add some comment. I would like to recommend the removal of the San Mateo Lane trees, and I only want to discuss those trees because they're the ones that I have knowledge of personally. Having lived in the same home since 1972, I've seen a lot of tree management, or whatever you would call, about topping them years ago, Brisbane topped them probably, I'd say they topped them every other year or every third year. That was fine for quite a few years, and then there became this situation where there was no topping at all, and within like 3 years they doubled in size. Then nothing happened for quite a few years. 1 or 2 years the canyon would be cleaned out and you'd see no further maintenance on them whatsoever. Recently you guys decided to take down 1 row of trees. I think it was a great idea. I wouldn't have recommended the row that you took out because it was the one closest, well, the one that was not closest to the road. The situation that we've got right now, if you travel up and down that road every day, and I've been one of the ones that's called in to ask to have the canyon re-cleaned up, or at least have that grove thinned out or something, is we've got a driving hazard. Now, if you don't believe me, just get in your car and drive up San Mateo Lane, and when you get up about halfway up San Mateo Lane, you cannot see any car coming down from the top of Kings Road down San Mateo Lane until you are almost head-to-head with them, because the road makes a little cut. So the tree that's on the corner there has gotten so large and been allowed to grow so large that it's also causing damage to the roadway itself. So my recommendation is that if you're going to clean them out, you might as well just take the rest of them out. You have trimmed them 2 years ago, and again, they've grown probably 30-some-odd feet in the last 2 years alone. I see that as a continuing maintenance issue, that if you don't remove them, they're just going to be, if you don't remove them now, it's just a matter of more and more costs down the road. I've mentioned the hazards. Fire hazard, obvious. There's probably 6 to 8 homes right in that immediate area that if that canyon did let go, there's 6 or 7 homes that are very close nearby, and they're up the canyon from there. That's it. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Claire Johnson.
It's really interesting to listen to other people's comments, to see different points of view that people have on this. I was very concerned, and I echo a lot of the feelings that Michelle expressed, and I hope that you'll listen to her carefully. I think that you have each one of these different areas has different elements to it that should require that it be treated individually. And I think one of the most important things is that you contact the people within 500 feet of each area and perhaps have a meeting with them so that you can talk about what this gentleman complained about. He's been experiencing it for 30-some-odd years. When I look at it, I like San Mateo Lane, but I'm looking at it just as a tourist. And if there is a genuine danger to people's homes and to the roadway, then I think you should take them out. But if you take them out, I think you should have a geotechnical engineer inform you whether that this slope with these particular soil conditions, whether you're going to have another kind of a problem, and how long. If you leave stumps in, they look pretty terrible, and if you take them out, then you're really upsetting the under area of the soil. So I think that that's something you have to consider it, and I would agree with everyone that the Paul Avenue trees probably should be taken out. There is an oak forest there, and there is a wildland fire danger, but there's no wildland fire danger at hardly any of these other sites. The issues in each one are different, and I would ask you to do as Michelle said and take a step back, consider each one of these areas individually, consider other trees. If you have trees in the city right-of-way, which people are very concerned about, and you're not even looking at them, and you're going to spend $125,000 or more because there are so many trees in item 3, but the prices that were given indicated that was only like between $23,000, and that seemed a little odd. And so you might want to consider, as Michelle suggested, using some of that money for a long-term plan to take care of all the trees in the city's right-of-way, especially people who are suffering with. And I can't recall where exactly, but on the council I remember someone who complained bitterly about the trees in the right-of-way that were right next to their home. So I think people really need a chance to talk to you about this, and you need to hear from them. I thought that in some ways talking about conservation by not even considering any other option besides removal, because that's what this staff report says. It's options for removal, not options for maintenance or care of the trees. I'm one of those people who likes eucalyptus trees. I don't think they should be in areas where they're killing the native plants right under it, but there is no habitat at San Francisco on that bluff. And I don't think that buckeyes, they are canyon trees that have been discussed. They're not going to grow well there. And so I would hope that you would consider the impact at the entrance of town of removing trees. We did thin those before. I question is really in terms of the health of the trees and the danger, what is needed? Or is this just because they're eucalyptus, let's get rid of them? I think if you'd like to see trees there, they're probably the best. Unless you want to wait a very long time, you're not going to have trees grow because natives will take a very long time if they live. I appreciate your letting me speak. I would say there was one person who I telephoned her and told her about your meeting, because she had informed the staff that she's very interested in this issue, but she was not informed about this meeting. And So I think there's a need to inform the public and let them tell you what they think. I appreciate that you have to begin somewhere, and this is the beginning of an urban forest. Maybe you could also talk to the Friends of the Urban Forest in terms of how to go about this in an effective manner. There's, a big chapter in San Francisco, and they might be able to be helpful. But I'd appreciate if you didn't just take every eucalyptus and cut it down just because it's a eucalyptus. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Please.
My name is Les Brandon. I live up at 180 Trinity Road, and I've been a resident of Brisbane for over 30 years. It looks and it sounds like the city has declared war on the eucalyptus tree. That's what I hear anyway. A couple of things. Communication with people in Brisbane, especially the people who live around these trees, hasn't been too good on the part of the city. A couple of weeks ago, we woke up to chainsaws cutting down a grove of eucalyptus trees on Humboldt, and called City Hall, and they said, and we were concerned about heritage trees. We were informed, well, no heritage trees, they're just cutting a few trees. Of course, I went down the block to find out that, no, they were cutting all the trees down. So that was miscommunication with City Hall. I called and I talked to Fred, and I said, we'd like to be informed if there's going to be wholesale cutting of trees. And he said, fine. We weren't informed about San Mateo Lane. Okay, so the communication has been pretty poor. When you talk about native species, can somebody tell me what a native tree of Brisbane is? I mean, oaks are California natives. Buckeye, I've told, was a Brisbane tree. If you look at pictures of Brisbane going back into the 30s, there were no trees here at all. It was just San Bruno Mountain. I don't think that we can willy-nilly just go and have all the trees cut down. If it's eucalyptus today, maybe it'll be oak tomorrow, and Buckeye the next day, so forth and so on. And it is a community, and I think the community should be involved in discussing these type of things, not someone just deciding that eucalyptus should be cut down. I guess I'm echoing a lot of what some of the people who spoke before me said, but there's a great miscommunication here, and I would hope that the City Council would go a long ways to solving this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Council comment. Debbie.
Yes. There's no doubt that we have to do something. At the same time, there's a plan right now. I believe Davy Trees or Davy Resource Group is preparing a forest management plan and program, and it's not developed, but it's in the process. I think we definitely need to consult and talk with the neighbors from all these affected areas. I do believe that we definitely need to come up with exactly knowing the entire cost. Where are the streets that we're going to have, the number of the street, and what is the actual cost? There's going to be surveys, there's going to be replacement costs. Just doing a quick and dirty calculation, I believe this is going to be about $500,000. That's my estimate. And I don't think that if we piecemeal it, we might be in trouble with bid splitting. We know the work that needs to be done. There are a lot of items that needs to be done. I think we need to really know the cost and timeline, and but I know that we have to do something. Thank you.
So what would you like to do tonight, if anything?
I believe that I would like to see it, we wait and to find out all the items that I talked about. Know the true cost, talk to the neighbors, and then we move on.
Michael?
Yeah, I have no real love for eucalyptus trees, and I can remember a windstorm some years ago where, when we lived on Klamath Street, there was a eucalyptus tree in the parking strip, and the root ball was heaving on this thing during the windstorm, and so I moved the cars in the middle of the night, and sure enough, a huge branch just fell down right where the cars were parked. So I am very concerned with the eucalyptus for that, and also for the fire hazard it presents. But we've already on this agenda approved $80,000 worth of supplemental spending, and I'm concerned that we would authorize more supplemental spending outside of the budget process on these trees without actually having a comprehensive plan. I think I'm echoing some of what Clark said earlier about when you remove a tree, you should have a plan for what to put in its place after you've removed it. I'd like to know which trees are most important for us to remove. Certainly the trees, those giant trees on San Bruno Avenue going out of town to the south, and those on San Mateo Lane are frighteningly large. But before I would feel comfortable authorizing more spending on the city's part, I'd like to know that those are indeed the right trees to pull out first, and I'd like to have a good idea of the overall budget of such a project, and then be able to actually allocate funds for that in a normal budget process.
Clark?
Fred, what is the status on the Davy tree analysis of the urban forest management plan?
They've completed the kind of the overall survey of the vegetation. They're preparing that in a database and preparing a report that I believe is going to be the administrative draft of the report. I believe is be ready sometime in the mid to late May.
Okay.
I think we were looking for something that might be ready to go to council in perhaps June, July period.
Okay, great.
It would be nice if that could be available for the budget.
Yeah, I think it'd be important to have it available at budget time. I mean, to kind of get our arms around this, like I started saying earlier, is to develop an overall plan as what it is that what we'd wish to do, and then, of course, communicate it to the public. Right now, I'm not comfortable with taking the action on anything tonight. I would like to see us to kind of get our arms around this. I think the most important part from what I said earlier is Paul Avenue. I think that's where the heaviest fire danger is, the heaviest fire load, and probably I think as Chris Evers sounded on that, ecologically with that oak forest up there. Because I would look at that more as a priority. San Francisco Street, I don't. I look at that as just total low priority because, and thank Clara and I think Michelle for probably clarifying that it's not really, it does sound like we're taking a war out on eucalyptus trees, which, hey, everybody, I think most people don't like them for what they are, but there are some beauty features to them, like some of the hidden stuff. I know the ones coming up San Bruno Avenue, I look at those as there are dangers to those. I mean, from sucking up a lot of moisture, and when they become real heavy, especially during a wet year, they just shear. They absolutely shear. And so maybe looking at maintaining those in a different way, or cutting every other one. And maybe the same thing like with San Mateo Lane, is kind of look at the options of not just clear cutting, but cutting every other one, because they have become huge. I mean, like the gentleman in the back, possibly that one that's going around the curve, and those two on the left side that are next to the house there, that, those are probably more dangerous trees. So I would say if we come up with a more comprehensive plan and better communication, once we go to adopt a plan or something like that, and then get the public involved and rack over that, and then develop a budget at our next budget year, which is coming up in June, I guess, right?
It is.
June. So,
If that's a motion, I would like to second it.
Well, before you make the motion and second it, may I have an opportunity to comment?
Oh, please, sir.
I'm not sure if, and I guess to comment on, if I could just finish, on the city staff report in regards to private property trees that, I wouldn't want to be heavy-handed and say, okay, well, you got to use Davy tree and they cost $30,000 and you got to cut your tree down using these guys. I mean, if we had an issue with folks that maybe came up, whether it be eucalyptus or acacia or oak or whatever, that became a hazardous tree, and they had to cut it down, and it was kind of a budding city right away, or it becomes a nuisance or something like that. That you allow them the option of getting their own tree cutting operator to do it. Not just.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
I mean, here it seems like, well.
No, the only purpose of this was to give you a sense of the
Order of magnitude.
order of magnitude.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I just, that would.
Mr. Mayor, just to address that, since that really hadn't come up in the discussion, and I don't think you're going to do it tonight, but I think between now and the time you deliberate on this and later on this year, you really need to think through this whole private property issue. As to, on one spectrum, you may just decide we're not going to get involved in that, other than a nuisance. And frankly, nuisances are going to be very far and few between. So it's that you're not going to be doing that very often.
Yeah.
If you want to get into a program where you get more aggressive with that, then I think the staff report lays out some approaches with regards to that, because we're going to be dealing with people in all sorts of different economic situations,
Right.
All sorts of different desires in terms of what they may or may not wish to do. It really gets to be a much more difficult program. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying, we need to walk into it with our eyes wide open and understand that that's a much more difficult scenario to deal with.
And I would view most of the nuisance trees that are probably up on private lands, up on the hillside where the fire load is, again, like the ones at Paul Avenue. I would consider that more of the nuisance
Paul Avenue
trees.
may be a unique situation, because it's not really, it is private property, it's not really in a developed area, it's not in somebody's front yard or their backyard.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it is. People see it as being in their backyard.
Present company accepted.
But I mean, I think we certainly understand the concern with regards to Paul Avenue. I think that's probably something we can try to deal with. But what I'm speaking to more is, I guess, the ones where it's in somebody's developed yard, and it's I mean, when the staff starts to talk about this, I mean, we come up with a lot of different questions and a lot of different scenarios, and kind of wonder how this is all going to work ourselves. And,
Sure.
and so I just think it's something we're going to all have to kind of really think through.
Okay.
I'm hearing several different themes. The first one that seems clear to me is that we'd like a further specific study of the trees up on Paul Avenue and above. And by whom that study should be done, I'm not sure. But another suggestion I'm hearing is that if we get to the stage of cutting any of these, we should be getting competitive bids from others as well as Davy. And I think the other thing that's clear is that we need to do some fleshing out of what options might be for assisting seniors or others who wish to get rid of large perhaps massive eucalyptus and who may not have the financial capacity for doing that. So we need to explore what the specifics of an appropriate program to do that would be. So I think what we've generated with all this discussion is more staff work and probably a wait until we get the Davy tree study, which I understand is coming in May. All of that said, I would like us to have a sense of urgency, particularly with respect to the property above Paul, which well, if it falls down, it falls on my house. And there are others like Chris very much in that category. And last summer when we had the larger fire on the hill, I had a vision of that coming across and into those eucalyptus trees, and you start talking now in the dozens or more of the houses that would be very much in dismay, not to mention the human contents thereof. So I don't know that any motion is necessary. I think further study is appropriate unless I'm told to the contrary by the council.
There's one thing I think I heard said, when that is public outreach, public participation in the...
I'm assuming that when we get this study from Davy and these additional explorations, then there would want to be a large, prominently circulated packet so that nobody's here saying, what are you doing? Are you trying to hide it? You can't hide that as you can't hide the eucalyptus trees. Please come to the mic.
It seems to me if fire is an issue, and it sounds like it is, what does the fire department say about those trees? I mean, has that been explored?
The fire department's involved and engaged with the Davy Resources Group urban tree management program. Okay. So their input will be core to the report.
And I haven't heard too much about maintenance. I talked to a gentleman today on San Mateo Lane, and he said he wanted the trees out because, they're terrible. They look terrible, so forth and so on. And he said at one time, he said they were really nice and attractive because the city was maintaining them. But he said the city hasn't maintained them for several years, so they're gone to hell. So it seems to me that maintenance should be an issue too. If you're going to save the trees, some of them or all of them, then obviously maintenance is an issue to do that, because if you just let them go, like some of the trees have been let go, you're going to end up with the same problem. So I haven't heard much about maintenance. And if a tree is dangerous, then you should be taken out. But who decides that? I mean, if property owners, myself included, have a bunch of eucalyptus and it wrecks my view, gee, the city wants to come along and take them out, take them out. But the thing is, we all live here in Brisbane. So, what may be nice and aesthetic for one property owner may not be nice to others, and vice versa. So consequently, yeah, danger is important, maintenance is important, fire is important, and those should be the issues to attack the trees, and nothing more than that.
Thank you very much. Anyone?
One more thing.
Please.
The sight lines on San Mateo Lane for driving, they're no worse than some of the sight lines on Trinity Road for driving, and probably half dozen other streets you can find in Brisbane. And even if you take all the trees out, if the road curves, if you come from a steep part and you make a left or right-hand turn and come down the hill, that's a blind turn. Are you going to level it off? I don't think so. So, driving consequences, if you live in Brisbane, you have to experience those. And then the traffic accidents, have we had traffic accidents on San Mateo Lane? to justify taking the trees out because of traffic accidents? These are all things to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this subject? And with the council's blessing, I'll declare a break.
Excuse me, may I finish
Please.
my comment? You made a summary of our discussions, and I wasn't quite satisfied with that summary.
Go ahead.
And I believe that I heard my colleagues to say we need to come up with a comprehensive plan of where are the locations, what is the cost, and what are the removal, what are the maintenance and replacement. Then within that, then we can prioritize and give Paul high priority. And before, and come up with that plan. Then go to neighborhood outreach. Get their input. I don't think it's appropriate to just disregard the rest of the community members on all those affected areas. So I would like to definitely see that, a comprehensive plan on removal, replacement, maintenance, and have a priority, and neighborhood outreach, and then we go to bed and, do the budgeting, and then talk about bidding.
Anyone else? We'll take the break now.
That agenda item's finished, right?
Yes, the agenda item is finished.
Okay.
on-site for sale units at 1 San Bruno Avenue. Mr. Smith.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this item implements one of the conditions of approval for the use permit for the mixed-use condominium development that's currently under construction at 1 San Bruno Avenue across the street from the hardware store. And that is a condition requiring the property owner enter an agreement with the city to restrict the sales prices for 2 of the units so as to make one of them affordable for low income and one to a moderate income household. The agreement that's on the agenda has been signed by the developer, and it provides the formula for determining the prices of the units and the affordability and the mechanism by which certain timetables are met. It also provides that the remaining 13 market rate units be made available for buyers that are qualified under the city's first-time home buyer program. So those units, there will be like a 30-day right of refusal. If, say, the city has 4 people that are kind of in the pipeline or qualified or can qualify, then we would exercise that right on the 4 and release the other 9 units to be sold to the general public. And this agreement provides the mechanism for implementing that.
Any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Public having gone home, I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Going on to item E. Consider directing staff to bring back a contract with a charter boat company who would like to operate at the Brisbane Marina.
Mr. Mayor, Council, good evening. I was approached approximately 2 weeks ago by a Captain John Lewis, who is a operator of the Hornblower cruises and also of the Red and White fleet here in San Francisco Bay. He approached me about the possibility of conducting a charter boat operation business out of Brisbane. Currently, I'm verifying all of his credentials and have attached a picture of the vessel that he plans to purchase to bring to Brisbane Marina. The reason he chose Brisbane Marina is because in the charter boat industry within San Francisco Bay, particularly operating out of Sausalito and San Francisco, the permitting process is extremely difficult. The markets are very closed to new boats entering into different marinas. He's approached Pier 39, San Francisco Yacht Harbor, and South Beach. All unsuccessfully. I'm happy that he drove down the freeway and stopped at Brisbane and spoke with me because this is a very doable business and a very good marketing plan. Most charter boat operators on San Francisco Bay that do the cocktail dinner cruises, the element of the cruise is really taking passengers to the 3 bridges and circling that. If you've ever taken a dinner cruise, they usually start serving dinner right about the north side of Alcatraz Island, and most people are usually wearing their dessert or their glasses of wine. He has a really good marketing strategy that I think will be very successful, and that is to embark passengers at Brisbane Marina, start serving them immediately. By the time they get to the bridge and to the heavier winds and waters, they will be taking the trays away, and then they'll be doing the bridge tours. I'm very encouraged by this individual and by his proposed plan. This week he's going to be dropping off his business plan to me, and with the help of the city attorney, we would like to craft a contract for this individual to enter into with the city of Brisbane, and would ask that you direct us to do so.
Questions?
I think this is a great idea. I like it. I think it adds some character to our marina and some visibility, and I'm glad he stopped here. I mean, if it's,
Take that as a motion?
Yeah, you can take that as a motion. I just have one question, though. That boat really fit 49 people?
Yes, it's already, I have the documentation for the vessel already. It's 45 feet long. It's been U.S. Coast Guard inspected, which means the Coast Guard comes out, and when they inspect a vessel, they do a bunch of testing on it. The height of the rails, the availability of life jackets and ability to get to them, safety plan that's aboard. When the Coast Guard signs off on that, it means that it's a safe vessel, and we already have that documentation in hand. He plans to do dinner cruises and also cocktail cruises, and he's hoping to capture capture some of the Brisbane community, both the citizens here, but also the business aspect of the community, you know, our community group. We've noticed at the Radisson Hotel, particularly on evenings around 5 to 6 o'clock, a lot of people in those buildings at Sierra Point don't go home right away because as best as I can anecdotally tell, a lot of them commute and they simply don't want to get in that traffic. And so they oftentimes go to the Radisson or some of the other businesses around and simply wait for the commuter traffic to ease them up. And he sees a possibility of doing a short 1-hour cruise around the bay where people could get on a boat, have some hors d'oeuvres and a glass of wine, spend an hour with them, bring them back, and then they could commute. So that's another marketing aspect that current charter boat operators in San Francisco Bay are not addressing. So I think he comes with some really good ideas that are very doable.
No, that's great. That's great.
Fabulous.
Any further questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going now to staff reports. City Manager's report on upcoming activities.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I have actually 3 items tonight. The first one is listed on your agenda is the Caltrain schedule issues. I think all of you have gotten some contact from a group called Coalition to Expand Train Service, or SETS. They have been requesting that a new train schedule be studied by Caltrain through the use of a independent consultant to advise Caltrain. This issue did come before the Joint Powers Board, which is a 3-county agency: Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and San Francisco County. The board decided not to move forward with the request from SETS, but did direct their staff to meet with the members of SETS, which I believe right now constitutes 6 cities, all in San Mateo County. And that discussion is going to take place, I guess, or at least start to take place later on this month. In talking with both a member from SETS as well as the general manager, CEO of Caltrain, a couple things I think need to be pointed out. The SETS folks tell me that they are requesting each city council that wishes to participate with them to pass a resolution that has the 4 action clauses that are that are in your packet of material. Those 4 action clauses basically are to request that Caltrain have an outside scheduling consultant that would focus on creating a better balance between local service and the express train service. They also, second, ask that cities be provided an opportunity to review and comment on alternative schedules so developed, and that Caltrain complete with all due diligence safety improvements planned within the county. And then finally, that Caltrain, Samtrans, and the cities work together to develop and evaluate additional improved means of connectivity between transit services. I think probably the rub that has happened here has been that Caltrain has, as you know, did adopt a new schedule a couple of years ago that I would note that we did participate in, and they were very open to our participation. That's not to be misunderstood that we got everything we want, but certainly they had a dialogue with us. But once their new schedule was in place and the baby bullet was implemented, their ridership is up fairly significantly, 32%, and their revenues are up 79%. So from the Caltrain's perspective, the new schedule is working. The second thing is that despite those fairly rosy ridership and revenue numbers, the system has a significant systemic financial shortfall. I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but I think I've heard in the neighborhood of $6 to $7 million a year. So they're wrestling, obviously, with how they address that and how they make that up and how they provide the current level of service going into the future. And as I indicated before, that certainly the 2004 new schedule did end up with reduced local service, reduced in the sense of the number of stops. I believe we basically went from every half-hour service to an every hour service, and then on the weekends, I think from a 1-hour service to a 2-hour service. The SETS folks have, I think, focused a lot on the number of stops in the system, the number of stops that you have in your local community. I would at least suggest that there's probably other ways to look at the system, and I think that the ridership numbers are a critical way of looking, and I would agree, I guess, with Caltrain staff that that should probably be the focus. And I would, I guess, suggest that, as I said in the staff report, that ridership in Palo Alto or Mountain View or Sunnyvale that comes up the system and is not on the freeway has a value to us here in Brisbane, because it's cars that are not on 101 as they come up into San Francisco. There was some discussion, I think, by SETS that there was less service in San Mateo County and more service in San Francisco. I'm not sure I really understand that argument, because the whole purpose of the system is to get people into San Francisco. So you're going to want to have more service at the end of the line, just as you would want to have more service that gets into San Jose, although I realize that isn't quite the end of the line on the southern end. From my perspective, I mean, I think we all appreciate the desire to have more local service. No one would argue with that. I think some of the other action clauses are reasonable things. I would argue that we have had good input, and that Caltrain has implemented the safety issues with regards to the system that go through Brisbane. We don't have any, on a staff level, any issue with Caltrain over those kinds of issues. I do think our main focus is probably maybe a little bit different than some of the other cities in San Mateo County, and I think those really have to do with what we ultimately end up doing with the multimodal station, pushing the ridership up there, which is only going to happen through the development out in the Baylands. And also the critical piece would be the connectivity. As you realize, or as the council knows, we have a fairly good, strong connectivity system with BART, and I think that we are maybe lacking a little bit with regards to our train connectivity, but there are reasons for that, and but I think that's probably something that an area that we should focus, as well as continuing to work with Caltrain and the other agencies on the multimodal station. With that said, I can answer any questions. The mayor and I had numerous emails last week discussing how best to place this before the council, and we decided we'd just do it as an information item, get some feedback from the council, and we'll take it from there.
Questions or feedback? Seppi?
Yes. When I found out that there's a group meeting and they want to discuss the impact of the cuts on small cities and how much they pay, they have done a great job in looking at what we're getting for the amount of money that people and taxpayers are paying. They approached Caltrain board and the staff. They were dismissed totally without even giving any kind of a validation to their concern. So, and then from what I understand, this ended up in the media. Mike Scanlon sent a letter to the media, and they said, okay, this is a fight, let's go into the media. I do believe that the staff at Caltrain, they're rather concerned that the consultant might come and actually come up with the plan that it would be workable. But the staff, I don't believe that they want to see that. They're not open to see that. And but I think there are ways to increase the ridership and help our transportation to be a viable transportation system. We want people to start using public transportation. With the gas prices, everything like that, we need to have a transportation that is workable. But right now, I don't believe it is. I have tried to use, at the train, I have to wait at least 1 hour. And our city manager mentioned that we have a great connectivity to BART. Do we have that on weekends? When I've taken flights to Oakland, and on my way coming back, there is no way. I have to take a cab. So if you want people to use public transportation, there has to be connectivity. Yes, we are better than a lot of them, but it's not adequate. This is not a fight. This is to really get the staff at Caltrain to look to see are there options, not just because what the staff recommended. That's all they're asking. There is no hidden agenda. There is no fight. That's all they're asking. That's my comment.
Just looking at, as I recall, back in the mid-'90s, the ridership of Caltrains was at its highest point since the '50s, and it actually grew since then, and then tailed off after '91. And looking at the Bayshore stop, it looks like a perfect bell curve from February '95 to February 2006, for 11 years. If you look at it, it's like, went up and back down. And I think the ridership is probably a lot lower now because of the amount of stops for Brisbane. Looking at the folks on the coalition, is a couple of them lost their stops. Broadway closed down completely. Atherton closed down completely. They lost 100%. And Menlo Park, I don't know if they went up or down. Looks like they went down also. So, I mean, that's where the majority of the folks are from on this coalition. I mean, they're trying to get ridership back for their city, which, I certainly understand. And perhaps, trying to force them, to do something through the cities. Maybe it's something that we ought to look at CCAG as helping to, what would you say, bridge the gap, to do another study instead of trying to force Caltrain. I mean, they are strapped financially, as it sounds, and maybe we're going about it the wrong way, because they don't want to do another study because they're seeing good results from it, with getting more ridership, the ridership starting to go up again, and they're getting more trains out there, is what it looks like, at least from the data. Is the amount of trains that have gone up from, what did you say, Clay, 70-something?
Well, the ridership is up 32%.
Yeah, so I saw a data point in here about the number of trains that they went up from 78 in November 2000 up to 96 trains in February of this year. So you're running 18 more trains, but you just have less stops because of the baby bullet. So they're making it more convenient, in a sense, for probably the majority of the riders, taking them from bulk to bulk, like what you said, north to south and south to north. So it becomes a political issue, is what it sounds like it's become. For those cities, it kind of got dumped on. And I guess what I'm saying is perhaps CCAG might be the best place to deal with this, instead of developing a coalition that is trying to force Caltrain to do something that, that they don't want to do. They're seeing results from what they did already. But if CCAG would fund a thing to perhaps look at, okay, how can we maybe redistribute or do some other things, maybe they would be open to that. But some dialogue needs to happen, instead of running stuff up the flagpole through the newspapers, or the city council is doing these things as what would you say?
Grandstanding.
Yeah. I mean, just separately, as separate bodies, doing resolutions without understanding the whole picture. And I think that's what really needs to happen, and the communication needs to be probably better, and not just a one-way thing, you know what I mean? So that's my 2 cents on it.
Anything else?
I'll throw 1 cent in on this one. And we just had a lecture by a transportation expert, and the take-home message I got from that was that you want to have fewer stops, you want to have faster trains or buses, and more people will start using them. And what I'm reading here is we're going backwards. SETS wants us to have more stops, more local service, and it kind of flies in the face of what we just heard from the transportation experts. I kind of agree. If there is something that needs to be done on a regional basis that affects all the cities along the rail line, it ought to happen at CCAG, at the appropriate county level body of all the cities, talking with Caltrain. And if the people from SETS want another study done, the first thing I start thinking of is, well, how much is that going to cost? I mean, a study's not free. Where's that money going to come from? And if they can identify a source of money for that, then maybe they should do the study. Just a suggestion. But I don't feel like taking any action on this at the Brisbane City Council level either.
May I?
Please.
I myself do not agree with the way they have gone about this. This has gone into the broader picture. This should have not gone that way. I even pulled myself out of it because I didn't think that what they're doing, the way they're going about it is incorrect. And I agree that definitely should go at a more regional body than just a few cities. But at the same time, we definitely need to look at the transportation. The executive director of what do you call TMC? What do you call that? Sue Lampert is.
MTC.
MTC. The executive director was talking and he said, look at that. Many years ago, gas was $1.60, $1.20, and they were getting 16 cents. Gas has gone to $4 per gallon, and they are still getting 10 cents, 16 cents. Overall, the transportation, public transportation, definitely need to be looked at. But I don't think what they're doing is the right way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sounds like we have consensus to do nothing.
You said you had two other matters?
1/3 of the way through. Sherry's going to hand out the second one. I'll wait for her to hand it out first. This is a follow-up to an item that was discussed last year in your budget sessions. And I have to credit Councilmember Barnes because it's, I think, been something he's been very anxious to see us try to move forward with over several years. And finally, in working with the police department, I think we've come up with a format that they're comfortable with and is relatively straightforward to administer. It will probably look familiar to you because it's very much similar to what you receive each month in terms of the monthly report. We would put this up on a monthly basis, and it would be put up around the 15th of each month, and it would be on the website and accessible to the entire community. Give people a little better understanding of the types of activities that the police department is responding to within the community. And hopefully will enhance the dialogue a little better between the city, between the residents and the department.
Are we just going to dump it on the website, or is there going to be some sort of public presentation where this is put in some context?
Well, we can do, what we thought about doing was going ahead and starting now. And then we can come back both probably maybe at a council meeting and make a presentation, give it a little bit more notification. We can also use our various forms of notification, such as the city newsletter, to indicate to people that this is information that's available.
So, but I guess my concern, I mean, I'm very happy to see this, but my concern is, of course, the experience the police department went through once before when this kind of information was disseminated, and that there isn't a context for people to understand this information within, so that they see there's crime, and they're concerned and they think that somehow the city is not doing its job. I'd like to make sure that people understand that, you know, Brisbane is safe. We have an excellent police department. We have, and I don't know, I mean, is our crime rate low at the regional average? Is it below the average? So that when people read a report such as this, they can say, they can feel more comfortable with this report in having the context that the crime level here is not something that's higher than it used to be. It's not something out of the average for the region, that it's something that they've lived comfortably with for years, but now they're just being made aware of what the actual crime is.
The specific details of it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we could probably put that kind of information on the front page here so that people understand. And I think that's a good point, is that, you know, nothing unusual is happening here.
It's
the same town you've lived in for the last...
It's good general context. Yeah.
If we had, and I don't know if there's some general information out there about Brisbane's crime statistics versus the San Francisco crime statistics, or South City or San Bruno, just something so that people understand that Brisbane is still a very, very safe place to live. I don't want, you know, information on crime in Brisbane to create an uproar or a state of dissatisfaction with the community with the crime that exists.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
No, it's good. You know, yeah, I guess we'll just try it out. You know, just looking at the amount of the amount of detail and stuff. You know, that I don't know what other cities do. I see the little blogs and stuff like that, but you know, it's like, you know, mostly like significant stuff. You know, like in other cities, like hit and runs or some other significant crimes. You know, so we're basically putting everything.
But on the other hand, if you put this information out like that, you may get people who know something to give you some information.
It could be true, too.
I suspect this will be a...
Well, we'll find out.
Feel it out, yeah.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, it was Stuart's idea.
No.
For the record.
We'll see you back at next meeting.
Okay, the third item is just update on our City Hall project, and just that we're going to be, right now, we're planning on moving out of the location that we're at, the 50 Park Place, sometime this summer, most likely in August. But there's a number of steps that are going to happen before we get there, not the least of which is that you will have on your agenda a item to approve the plans and specifications for the City Hall remodel. We are working right now with the architect that we have, and I believe we're at the 90% drawing stage, which means we're very close to being able to finalize the project. We're going to have to come back to you, I guess, with a couple items with regards to the financing aspects of this, and then the project will be ready to go forward. August, we think, that doesn't mean that the project is going to start in August, but the reason we're kind of focusing on August is that the council will be on vacation that month. Well, not individually,
recess.
but we won't be having meetings. We'll have a recess month, so it'll be a perfect opportunity for us to have the time to go through the process of moving out. Now, the question is, where are we moving to? We're still looking at a couple places. I can guarantee you we'll be here in Brisbane. And it'll be,
that's a good start.
Easy to access, and we will get that information out to the public early and often, and we'll do everything we can to make sure public notification is taken care of. And hopefully we can come back to you at the June meeting at least with a much more firm report in terms of where, timing, and all that.
Okay, questions? Thank you. We'll move on to Mayor Council matters. Are there any subcommittee reports?
I just want to inform that ABAG is having their meeting on Thursday, and I do understand that you cannot go and Cy cannot go, and there's supposed to be a proxy for me to take with me to vote, to be a voting delegate. Thank you.
Speaker Sherry, thank you.
Thanks.
Item B, give direction to staff on process for appointments or interviews of Traffic Advisory Committee applicants and vacancy on the PB&R Commission.
I have.
Do you want a verbal?
Quick, overall context.
We need to fill a partial vacancy till the end of the year on the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission, of which we have advertised for and received no applications, so we encourage members of the public to apply. And then number two, we have 3 openings on the Traffic Advisory Committee. Have received 2 applications, of which you have in front of you. You can choose to either appoint them tonight or at a future meeting, or direct me to schedule interviews. And I would still need to continue a recruitment for an additional member or 2.
Motion to appoint Jim Lucas and Vernon Fong to the Traffic Advisory Committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. And then I would suggest to continue to advertise for PB&R commission person.
I think that works. Our second item B, discussion of potential water rationing per SFPUC.
This is mayor and council item, so I think.
All right.
Mr. Barnes?
Let me hand out stuff then. I've highlighted the pertinent information for you. And this is I have a couple of articles from the Chronicle, and then there's one, actually, and there's a second one, Sherry, if I can get that to you. There you go. Actually, I can give you 2. And really the pertinent points here are that Bay Area water users, and we are one of the water users in Bay Area. You all one? Sure. Sorry. Thank you. I got another
There's
one too.
another one.
And actually, I have a letter too. The gist of these articles are that the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, from whom we buy our water, is trying to get people to conserve water before they need to ration water this summer. There's a possibility that if water is not conserved adequately, that mandatory restrictions could be applied by the SF Public Utilities Commission, and this could mean reducing consumption by individuals up to 20%. Customers who do not comply could face fines or have their water turned off. That's one of the articles that I saw in the Chronicle, and the other one was that that the PUC could ask for mandatory curbs and then issue fines to customers who do not fix leaky faucets and impose fees on those who use more than their allotted share of water. So over the next 2 months, it looks like the PUC is going to evaluate which penalties would make the most sense if they call for voluntary cuts in water and if those requests for cuts don't yield results. And so I was wondering if it makes sense for Brisbane to send a letter, to contemplate sending a letter to BAUSCA and or the PUC. And I can just read this quickly. It'll be easier for me to read it than to try and describe it. The gist of the letter is that in contemplating penalties for water usage, Brisbane would request special consideration because we show a commitment to sustainability. Brisbane is concerned with management of natural resources such as water. Our water and sewer fee schedule reflects the community's desire to encourage water conservation. Even when water is plentiful, we charge users progressively more per unit of water used, providing a financial incentive for water conservation. Over the past 7 years, the City of Brisbane has raised water rates a total of 125%. Is that about right? 150%, to the point where current use-based revenues now cover water system delivery costs. Any further conservation will mean fewer units sold and place more users in the lower cost per unit part of the fee schedule, meaning revenues from use will no longer cover system costs. This will result in further rate increases, negating the incentive to conserve. According to indicators for sustainable San Mateo County, Brisbane has been among the lowest per capita residential consumers of water in the county, an important measure of sustainable living. This means that our incentives for water conservation have been effective and that Brisbane residents have already eliminated most of the discretionary water uses. Indicators for a sustainable San Mateo County also notes a trend: the less affluent the community is, the less water consumed per capita. This likely means that the less affluent use more of their water for the necessities of living, such as drinking and sanitation. An across-the-board cut in water use thus disproportionately affects less affluent communities, as any reduction in water use quickly impacts sanitation uses. Any fiscal penalty for not achieving an across-the-board reduction in water use exacerbates the social inequity and unsustainable practice. By demanding that Brisbane decrease water consumption by the same percentage as communities with up to 5 times the per capita water use, the agency is encouraging social inequity and water wastefulness during times of plenty. We believe that a permanent commitment to water conservation should be rewarded, not punished, during drought years. We hope you share our permanent commitment to sustainability and will not punish environmentally responsible and less affluent communities during the coming drought. So now, this is just my pass at a letter, and I'm not saying this language, should be adopted tonight, but it's just an issue that I'm very concerned with, that Brisbane has done such a great job in conserving water, is responsible, and that if we can't manage to reduce our consumption by another 10 or 20%, we're going to get hammered with fines and penalties, which I think is wrong when you look at how much water we use per year compared to other communities in San Mateo County. And I went ahead and copied out the pertinent information from the indicators report. Brisbane basically uses 66 gallons per day per person in our community. And there is a community in San Mateo County that uses 332 gallons per person per day. And so for somebody in a community that uses 332 gallons per person per day to cut back by 10 or 20%, I don't think is a very hard thing to do. But I think that in a community like Brisbane, where we don't water massive lawns, where we don't have a lot of swimming pools, to cut back the same amount is more difficult. And I would like to see BAUSCA and the SFPUC take that into consideration when they start to impose penalties for a lack of conservation if we have a drought.
Second. This is good information. May I suggest that you authorize the mayor to tweet and send?
Sure. As long as
I'll show you first.
Thank you.
That was my second.
I understood that there might be some BAUSCA. There was an email that I saw there was some meeting or on today, the 16th. I was just wondering if there's information from BAUSCA that might reflect on this. Is there anything
Oh, so I'm a little off guard on this because a lot of this appeared to have happened while I was out of the country on vacation this past week.
You're out of the country on vacation and not attending the Brisbane business?
Yes, sir. And I really was not too troubled while I was catching fish. I'm sorry to admit that, but it was just a lot of fun in La Paz with my teenage son. I think my context on this is I read the press releases that came both from BAUSCA and SFPUC is that right now they're trying to ask people for a voluntary reduction, that they think that there may be the implementation of the mandatory reductions, although they're trying to avoid that. And I was wondering if, before the council elected to send a letter out, if you wouldn't like to review the interim water shortage allocation plan that the council in 2001 approved as a member agency of what was then the Bay Area Water Users Association and is now the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency as a result of some intervening legislation, and look at what it was that the city has already gone on record as saying that they're willing to accept as the means and methods for the reductions. Because the reduction itself, I think that's probably the one document I didn't bring with me tonight when I was looking at averages and press releases and that sort of thing. It's a somewhat complicated program in that it has multiple components to it. And one of them, admittedly, works against agencies that are already very conservation-minded, because it's a rolling average of your past couple of years. And so if you've been doing a really, really good job of conserving, it hurts you. But that's just one piece of it. So I think maybe I might suggest that the council or perhaps individual members
I think it
give staff the opportunity to get re-familiar, give themselves the opportunity to get re-familiar with
might
that.
be very helpful if you give us that information and your observations on it. It'd be
Yes, sir.
Good context for this.
Yes, sir, and I'd do it, and I'd be happy to do it in whatever format the council would like. If you want to do that as one of the subcommittees, if it's the water and sewer rates, or if it's maybe Councilmember Barnes and another member, or if you want to do it at a regular meeting.
I suppose
I'm back from fishing, so I'm happy to do whatever you'd like now.
I have a suggestion that we just formed a temporary subcommittee for this purpose. I've sensed to the council that that's okay.
Perfectly fine with the Water and Sewer Rate Subcommittee, at least 50% of it.
Yeah. We'll go from there.
It's a very important issue, because if we reduce consumption by 20%, that's 20% reduction in our revenues on our water.
That's probably more than that, because you might slip down into a lower rate.
Exactly.
Well, we come to oral communications number 2, and as there's no member of the public left in the audience,
maybe the cameraman want to speak.
I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.